Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome back, everyone. It's great to see you for another class on the Dashibhumika Sutra. And this evening, I know we're going to be discussing the reports that you've done with the sutra this week. Before we get started with that, Dr. Lancaster, do you have any words for the class?
Well, I want to say hello to everybody. Nice to see you, as always. I look forward to your comments on irreversibility. And if you have other questions or comments you want to make before we get going, please feel free to ask or to speak now. John, hello.
Hello, Professor. Hello, Chris. Hello, everyone.
We're just getting underway. So, Chris, I'm going to ask you to be the moderator and help introduce each student before they make their report.
Okay. So this week, your assignment was how the 10 bhumis lead to the state of where the bodhisattva is irreversible. And the question is this state achieved by entering or being in bhumi 7, or does it take place when entering bhumi 8? Now, if it takes place in bhumi 7, what then happens in bhumi 8 that makes it significant? Who would like to start us off this evening? No volunteers?
I could go.
Shan, yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, so when I share my process, when I start to check this interesting question, I thought it's a kind of like difficult one, but still find interesting. I started to read this time in Venerable Xingyun's completed works website. I searched the word irreversible ground, so in Chinese 不动地, and I found to see whether some kind of like a summary could help me to have a understanding. And I picked one. This one is in Chinese, but I translated use AI for it is the sentence. I think that in the explanation 8 kinds of consciousness practice chant, this article. So I think this word, the sentence, it is not until the 8th bhumi, the immovable stage, is completely destroyed, accomplishing the wisdom of equality. So I think this sentence helped me. I think, yeah, should be entering the 8th state, then you will be irreversible. So, and the other passage article also, it's the 4 kinds of wisdom. The article title, the essential wisdom of attaining Buddhahood. It is explaining the wisdom profound insight process. The Greek is all mentioned that only after attaining the 8th immovable ground, then the 6th consciousness transformed to pure and undefined wisdom profound insight, and all after 8th ground and could becomes most radiant, and then after 8th ground, so no defined dharma can correspond with it. So I feel like when I'm reading those articles, also the other one article, very much also write about the 10 grounds. Also the explanation, the immovable ground. Their afflictions no longer manifest, they remain unmoved by fan or gain, and they are not subdued by external conditions. I feel like when entering the eighth ground, so you will be stable, be sure. And then when I read the sutra, for sure, there's some sentence in the chapter 7, like I just pick up someone maybe could identify my guessing from reading the articles. Due to the power arising from this, his natural success is reaching the eighth ground. And reading this, I feel like maybe kind of starts a little bit in the seventh ground already, and a little bit changing my mind. And then also in the chapter 7, as he able on the far-reaching ground, he becomes able to enter. So, and also mentioned that in the seventh ground, far-reaching ground, already they have achieved the samadhis. And in my knowledge, I think samadhi is really something great. So I feel like I changed my mind a little bit. Oh, in seventh ground, they have already began to have something different. So it's not the entering a ground. And also, and right when in the seventh ground, they already have the Pratikatya Buddha kind of like status like that. So, and I changed my mind already. And also reading the chapter 8, in chapter 8, of course, in the eighth ground, the Bodhisattva during on the seventh ground, and then he then becomes able to enter the eighth ground. So that's the sutra, and I will use AI. AI was always interesting. And then I pasted the passage, the two articles, and I asked the question. The Bhumi, is the state achieved by entering, being in Bhumi 7, or does it take place when entering a Bhumi? So asked the question, and I posted the two documents for sure. And then it gave me the answers that the seven Bhumi makes the first state of irreversibility, where Bodhisattva can no longer fall back into lower vehicles, but still requires conscious efforts in practice. And give me this the article and the key points. No regression to lower paths, still has subtle efforts not yet fully naturalized in non-dual wisdom. And then in the eighth ground, eighth Bhumi, there's full irreversibility in this ground. So establish absolute effortless non-regression, where even the pull towards nirvana must be actively balanced by vow power. So, and then kind of give me a surprise, give me a really wonderful table to give me the very good briefing. So in seven Bhumi, the effort requires yes, but in eight Bhumi is no. And nirvana tendency still engaged in the world, innate, and the world would naturally enter nirvana. And Buddha guidance optional, and Mandarin interversion. So the AI helped me that to understand. And in seven more partially, so it's kind of like, yeah, similar to my reading the sutra, partially irreversible in seven Bhumi, in the eight Bhumi is absolute irreversible. Yeah, and also it's very interesting. He asked me what are like some cross-reference to other sutras. I say yes, and it give me so many sutras, the other evidence. I found it really interesting. I just keep talking to this and then ask me another sutra, Yogara test, and yes. But they all provided the evidence that in seven Bhumi is partially, but in eight Bhumi is already full irreversibilities. So I just keep talking to the AI, give me lots of other sutras, evidence. And also at the last, I also check with Venerable Xingyun's completed works, but I found like it is maybe difficult to get access to the website. I'm not sure because when he provided those title, I rechecked, it did not appear. For example, Venerable Xingyun did not write an article on this sutra, but maybe kind of like a summary, but the same conclusion. So I find it's really interesting. AI this time provide me more hints from other sutras. So that's my sharing. Thank you.
Very good. I'm going to leave some of the discussion until everybody has reported tonight. So let's just listen to each other for a while. But very good report. Thank you, Shanshan. Appreciate it.
Thank
We'll
you.
get back to you in our discussion later in the evening.
Thank
Or
you.
more to your case.
Thank you, Shanshan. Definitely highlighted how this is a tricky question. Who would like to go next? Khan. Yes, please.
Yep, let me share my screen. So I approached this question from two angles, using ChatGPT and also try to read through the sutra itself. So I sort of compile a list of things I learned from both sources. So one thing I was trying to understand is really what's leading up to Boomi 8. So there were a few things I found is quite interesting. For example, in Boomi 5, it talks about the definite and irreversible resolute for the Buddhahood. Basically, I'm looking for the keyword irreversible throughout Burmese. I thought maybe that's a keyword to look for because there's just so much content throughout the sutra. So I'm just trying to use some defined keywords for this research. And then leading up to Boomi 8, of course, 7, it's really talking about complete fullness that enables the entry into the path of wisdom and spiritual knowledge. In this, at this stage, it is talking about it's beyond the desire or other afflictions. And when you enter into the seventh ground, you're sort of going through this through a very direct manifestation of skillful means and wisdoms. So then I really look at the rely on the ChatGPT to give me some key comparable study between these two sutras, two levels. It talks about Boomi 7 is skillful means, and Boomi 8 is great vows and aspirations. And in terms of core qualities, it talks about dynamics, adaptabilities versus unshakable stabilities. And also in terms of, I think what Shanshan mentioned as well is in terms of wisdom, it's moment by moment, but still emerges to act compared to non-conceptual conceptual wisdoms, which is continuous. So I can just from these comparisons, I can see there's definitely a progression there between Boomi 7 and Boomi 8. I really like the example that ChatGPT showed. In this case, the traditional image. I didn't really know what that really means, but it talks about for Boomi 7, a traveler who have crossed the ocean and desert, but may still turn back. Versus Boomi 8, they talk about a mountain that no storm can move. I thought that's a very interesting analogy that AI uses to compare the two Boomis, and I think that's very relevant to today's question. So I was just trying to use ChatGPT as another source for my study and go back to my main research here. So in order to transition to Bhumi 8, the Bodhisattvas leave behind the path involved cultivation of all deliberate efforts and preliminary practices. Honestly, I don't really know what that means. But as I'm going into this, it feels like maybe as you enter into Bhumi 8, there's really no intention for it's more effort. To me it's more like an intention, because maybe before Bhumi 8 you still have the intention and you wanted to be attain Buddhahood, versus once you enter Bhumi 8 you don't even have that intention. So everything is so like, I don't know if effortless is the right term for it. It's more like it's become so natural. So there's no desire to be someone. It's more like you are that one. That's sort of how I feel. So then again, going back to the question, I'm trying to figure out, okay, what is from Bhumi 7 to Bhumi 8, what is the significance? Since Dr. asked this question, there must be some kind of significance between the two Bhumis. So I tried to look for it. So it's but the summary is Bhumi 1 to 7 is more of a path, a progression, or a deliberate effort, versus Bhumi 8 is sort of you get to a state where there's no deliberate effort. That's just how I take it when I was reading through this. And I also look up to see what is the significance of Bhumi 8. So basically it talks about immovable, irreversible. It talks about effortless functioning. It talks about direct realizations. And all of them make a lot of sense to me. I'm not gonna go through all this like sentence by sentence, but just my own realization is it's not Bhumi 7, since there is still like an effort, and there is still an intention, even though you already reached to a certain level, the level, you obtain that level, but since you still have that effort, so it is possible that it still goes back. I really like the analogy of, cross the sea, then you still want to go back. Maybe sometimes you feel tired, versus once you're at Bhumi 8, you completely transform how you think, who you are, and you don't even feel there is an effort. That's just how I learn it. So yeah, there are other things I think is similar to what Shanshan mentioned, so I'm going to repeat that. But in general, that's sort of like a quick summary of my learnings.
Very good. Also, and again, I'm going to hold off discussing until everybody has presented, but thank you very much, Kama. That's a very good report. Thank you.
Thank you, Khan. Who would like to go next? Volunteer. Venerable, yes, please.
Make it small. Oh, I don't know how to make it smaller. Maybe like this. Okay, so good afternoon, Professor and everyone. To me, in order to answer the questions or the assignment provided by the professor, I realized that DeepSeek work better than ChatGPT, and then I didn't try to go to ChatGPT to compare because it might be take long time. And then in order to do that, for me to understand which Pumi, so I go to like, please summarize the 10 Pumi of the Subhumika Sutra. I just allow the AI to summarize each of the Pumis, number 2, and until number 10. And then I just asked the questions just like, do all the stages lead to the state where the bodhisattva is irreversible? And then it will answer which state irreversible, which state reversible. In here, AI just explain me, like according to the Subhumika Sutra, they just say irreversible is only from the Pumi age. And in other sutra, just like Avatamsaka Sutra and some other sutra, say from the stage 7. So I will go one by one. So here the answer is that the Subhumika Sutra, they just say that irreversibility, we need what Tanaya, the stage where the Bodhisattva cannot regress or fall back from the path to Buddhahood is not attain all the Pumi. They just tell that not all the Pumi. And then they go one by one, just like 8 Pumi. They just mention the 8 Pumi, Ajala, are immovable. This is the critical state where the irreversibility is definitely achieved. Yeah, they just say mention this one, and then they just say that earlier Pumi from 1 to 7, and they just say they are still considered reversible, but they panaka, in the sense that they could theoretically regress if they abandon their vow or lose faith. And then they just explain about the letter Pumi 9 and 10, and it already know it beyond that, outwardly irreversible. And then they just explain just like this, why 8 Pumi master. They just give the argumentation and why it have to be in a Pumi 8. Just no more backsliding from the state toward the Bodhisattva is immune to folly into lower realms, abandoning the path or losing their Bodhisattva status. Spontaneous activity, like the action effortlessly benefit being without karmic obstructions, just say like something like arise naturally. And then they just mention here, exception and debate. Some Mahayana texts, just like Avatamsaka Sutra, suggest irreversibility begin earlier, just like here, Pumi 7, due to deepening insight into emptiness. Yeah, they just raise the idea from the other sutras, like Avatamsaka Sutra. They say in the 7th state. And here just say, however, the Subhumika Sutra, they go back to talk about the Subhumika Sutra explicitly lie irreversibility to the age Pumi, emphasizing its role as the immovable foundation for the final Buddhahood. So yeah, they just claim like this. And then I just say, I try to stress. It's like, so according to the Bhumika Sutra, entering the 7th stage, the Bodhisattva is completely irreversible. And then the answer is that they say yes. Yeah, according to the Bhumika Sutra, yes. Bodhisattva on the 7th Bhumi to Rangama far reaching is still considered reversible. Pratipanaka, meaning they could theoretically regress or abandon the path to Buddhahood. However, this is a nuanced point, and the risk of regressions diminish significantly as Bodhisattva process through the stage here the breakdown. Yeah, they just claim that only the 8, the 7 still can have a chance, even though it's far-reaching, but they still have chance to go back, to reverse. And that they just explain the key. Just say reversibility in the 7th stage. And the Bhumika Sutra explicitly state that irreversibility is only fully secure at the 8 Bhumi Ajala, immovable. I think it might be the same as the previous presenter who say this one is just say not fully, maybe partially irreversible. Until then, including the 7th Bhumi, the Bodhisattva's attainment is not yet unshakable. But regression is extremely unlikely. They just do the conclusion and maybe unlikely for the regression. By the 7th Bhumi, the Bodhisattva have already perfected skillful mean, upaya, and transcendent wisdom, prajna. Their compassion is vast, and the action are dedicated entirely to liberating beings. Yeah, this is the conclusion. That is to say, in practice, regression at this stage consider almost inconceivable for the sincere bodhisattvas. And with the 7th Bhumi is not fully reversible. Just say it same. Why 7th Bhumi isn't fully irreversible? I think in this point, the AIs want to mention it partial, irreversible. So the 7th stage, Bodhisattvas still engage in effortful practice, and have not yet realized the unborn natures of phenomena. The Bhumika Sutra framework is strict. They just say like it's strict. It's not just say like partially. They don't want to say partially irreversible. So it's strict. Only the 8, 10 Bhumis are pure stages. Suddha Vasta, free from even subtlest karmic obstructions. And here they just summarize something as I have mentioned. Yes, just like technically the 7th Bhumi is still reversible according to the Bhumika Sutra, but in practical terms, the 7th stage Bodhisattva is so advanced that regression is fundamentally impossible unless they actively renounce the Bodhicitta, a near unthinkable act given their profound realizations and commitment. Irreversibility definitely seals at the 8th Bhumi, marking the Bodhisattva unshakable progress toward Buddhahood. distinctions highlight in Sutra emphasis on 8 Bhumi as the critical turning point where all doubt and regression are permanently overcome. Yeah, this is all my presentation, and I think it's not something different from the previous presenter. They just say like for the Dasabhumika Sutra, it like strictly like uphold on the 8 Bhumi, but the 7 Bhumi is not fully irreversible. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't help but again say how wonderful it is to see the progress you've made in using AI from your first reports until now. It's very pleasing to see your growth and development.
Thank you.
Keep it up. We'll come back to all this.
Thank you, Venerable. Who would like to, Reverend Kanjin, your hand is up.
Okay, I'll go next. All right, let me try to share it here. I think that it should still work. Are you able to see it?
Yes, yes,
Okay,
thank you.
great. All right. So on DeepSeek, I went ahead and the way that I worded the problem was, is the irreversible state of the Bodhisattva achieved by entering or being in Bhumi 7, or does it take place when entering Bhumi 8? Very interesting. It says specifically in Mahayana Buddhism, the irreversible state of a bodhisattva typical associated with the 8 Bhumi, Akala, or the immovable, rather than the 7th Bhumi. And here they break it down. The 7th, which is of course a stage in which they've understood and perfected skillful means and wisdom, upaya and prajna, transcending all the afflictive and cognitive obstructions and the idea of dhyana in their gross manifestations. However, there are these subtle tendencies and habitual tendencies, which are klesha, or the kind of aspects that have not yet been dissolved, meaning that they are not fully reversible, that there is irreversible. There is some aspect that is still uncultivated. They show them as highly advanced, so a lot of times people could see the 7th Bhumi as being someone who has attained full enlightenment. However, there is a potentiality of regression. In the 8th Bhumi, the Akala Achala, or the Akala, the immovable, upon entering the 8th Bhumi, the Bodhisattva attains irreversibility, meaning that they never fall back. That's the way that they state it. Into the lower realms, which, as we could see, the Shavaka, which is the hearers, that's the Buddha's original disciples, and the Prataki Buddhas, which are the private Buddhas, those that are enlightened by other teachings besides Buddhism, or the samsaric paths. That means the paths that lead to the cycle of birth and death. But in the 8th Bhumi, they're fully committed, and that all of the aspects of their nature have been purified. And it's interesting that this is marked by not needing to have a deliberate effort to progress, but they're a kind of enlightened tendency towards enlightenment, or remaining within an enlightened mind. And the stage is marked with a non-conceptual wisdom, which most people think of wisdom as conceptual. They see that as part of the samsaric world, still involving mind, and that through this non-conceptual wisdom, it removes all of the obstructions that they have. So basically, to answer that question, while the 7th Bhumi represents the advanced stage, where the Bodhisattva is seen as nearly unshakable, complete irreversibility is achieved by entering the 8th Bhumi. Then the Bodhisattva is inevitably destined for Buddhahood. However, one of the interesting words I saw was on Kala, which is actually, I don't know if people know from Japanese Buddhism, Fudo-myo, which is one of the main myo deities. So I wanted to say this name, which is representative of the eighth bhumi of the Bodhisattva path, is wanted to see which Bodhisattva this is connected to, because in esoteric Buddhism in Japan, Vajrayana, Akala is also the name of the wrathful wisdom deity, also known as Fudo-myo, or Vidya Raja. And this deity embodies this immovable determination that we spoke of before, an aspect of the eighth bhumi, and the power to overcome obstacles on the path of enlightenment. And then I asked about the connection between Akala Bodhisattva and the eighth bhumi, if there was any connection. It went through some that there is a type of connection between this Bodhisattva Fudo-myo in Japanese and the eighth bhumi, which is immovable, that they're seen as almost the same, reflecting the shared themes of irreversibility, steadfastness, and the destruction of obstacles. Goes into the similarities, etc. And then also how Fudo-myo and Vajrayana traditions is seen as the person who actually purifies or eliminates all obstacles on the Bodhisattva path. And then finally, when I was going down, one of the aspects I really wanted to ask or check on was that in my tradition, we specifically focus on the Nirvana Sutra and the Lotus Sutra. And so one of the aspects that I had seen in the Nirvana Sutra was that the Buddha says that the concept of the irreversibility of the Bodhisattva is kind of an expedient. And that actually he states that without the six paramitas that someone is able to regress. So I asked, how does the eighth bhumi coincide with the Mahayana Nirvana Sutra that states a bodhisattva can fall back into suffering if they do not uphold the six paramitas? And the answer was wonderful, actually. It said the relationship between the eighth bhumi's irreversibility and the Mahayana Nirvana Sutras, Mahaparinirvana Sutra, warning about regression, hinges on a nuanced doctrinal distinction in Mahayana Buddhism, where the eighth bhumi, Akala, the immovable, is traditionally considered the state of non-retrogression. The Nirvana Sutra emphasizes that sustained practice of the six paramitas, perfections, remains essential, even for advanced bodhisattvas, to avoid the risk of backsliding. So, the eighth bhumi, of course, as it said, is the idea of irreversibility. The irreversibility is not based on effort, but on natural stability. That's an essential part when you think about the eighth bhumi. And the Nirvana Sutra's warning, which is conditional stability, tempers this by stating, even though advanced bodhisattvas must uphold the six paramitas, if they neglect this, they're easy to fall back into hell, actually, it states. So resolving, this was interesting, resolving the apparent contradiction, the two perspectives complement rather than contradict, in that the eighth bhumi's irreversibility refers to final destiny, where they will become Buddhas and not fall into lower realms. Nirvana Sutra's warning refers to temporal obstructions that may stagnate or prolong their path if they abandon practice. So I just thought that this was very interesting. They're going through practical applications and even the esoteric perspective, which again, they talk about Fudo-myo. And so the conclusion was they're two sides of the same wisdom. So the eighth bhumi's irreversibility and the Nirvana Sutra's warning reflect different emphasis, one on ultimate certainty and the other in practical diligence. Together, they ensure bodhisattvas never abandon beings while resting in wisdom. I thought that was a really great conclusion to bring the two concepts together. So,
thanks very much. I'm glad that you were able to make use of your own tradition in order to deal with this issue. because it's present, I think, in every Buddhist tradition. The question is an important one. Again, I thank you for a very good report. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Kanjan. Let's see. Looks like we have time for one more before we take our break. Who would like to go? Let's see. Venerable Sanjit.
Yes. Good evening, professors and my classmates. I used ChatGPT for today's presentations and asking questions. I asked ChatGPT the 10 bhumis lead to states where the bodhisattvas is irreversible. Is this state achieved by entering or bhumi in the bhumi, being in bhumi 7, or does it take place when entering bhumi 8? So ChatGPT answered it's a great questions. The irreversible state of bodhisattva, or they assured of reaching full Buddhahood and cannot fall back to a lower state, is a key concept of Mahayana Buddhism, and also the Sabhumika Sutra offer announced views when these non-retrogressions status is attained. Then the state of irreversibility, a bodhisattva becomes abhayavartika, meaning irreversible or non-retrogressive, when their realization and compassions are so deeply established that they will never fall back to the state of an ordinary being or sabaka. Then said this irreversible state ensure that the bodhisattva will inability attain of full Buddhahood. So then ask the questions, is this achieved at Bhumi 7 or Bhumi 8? Bhumi 7 said Bodhisattva attained mastery of skillful means, upaya, and profound insight. Some Mahayana sources like Abhisamaya traditions suggest that irreversibility may already be secret here, because the Bodhisattva no longer clings to self. Their practice become autonomous, powered by compassion and wisdom. They have developed great meditative absorptions and fearlessness. However, this is often viewed as a point where irreversibility is functionally apparent, but not yet fully accustomed. Then Bhumi 8 said the universal consensus is most classical Mahayana sources, like the Sabhumika Sutra. True definitive irreversibility is achieved upon entering the 8th Bhumi. Asked why, Bodhisattva becomes immovable, completely stable and in wisdom and compassion. They cannot be swayed by any afflictions, kilesha, even the substance, and their practice become effortless, natural, and unstoppable. They have transcended conceptual clinging and fear completely. Then conclusion said entering Bhumi 8, Bhumi is traditional and doctrinally accepted point where the Bodhisattva becomes irreversibly established on the path to Buddhahood. Bhumi 7 marked threshold where qualities of irreversibility emerge, but full unshakable realizations only manifest in Bhumi 8. Then I ask again, if it takes place in Bhumi 7, what happened in Bhumi 8 that makes it significant? Said excellent. Even if irreversibility begins to emerge in Bhumi 7, Bhumi 8 remains deeply significant because it marks as a profound qualitative shift in Bodhisattva's inner realizations, meditative stability, and spontaneous functioning. Then the recap about Bhumi 7, same as first question. Bodhisattva masters school remains upaya and deep meditative insight. Their compassion and wisdom are highly advanced, and they are possibly functionally irreversibly they won't turn back from Buddhahood. And say there is still a subtle dualistic trace, and the mind can still be conceptually achieved. Then why Bhumi 8 is so significant? Said even if irreversibility is present by Bhumi 7, Bhumi 8 brings about a full irreversible. Then point 1, total immovable of mind and emotions. Bodhisattva is now utterly unshakable, no longer disturbed by praise, blame, fear, and desire. And even stable emotional and conceptual disturbance are completely pacified. Their equanimity is vast and unbearable, like a mountain or the open sky. Then number 2, effortless, spontaneous, compassionate action. Before Bhumi 8, Bodhisattva practices still equal deliberate effort. In Bhumi 8, action becomes spontaneous, selfless, and naturally wise. Compassion and wisdom now flows without hindrance and conceptual farming. The number 3 is supreme mastery of samadhi and non-conceptual wisdom. Bodhisattva avoids in the profound, unbroken meditative absorptions, samadhi, even while action in the world, and the realizations of emptiness. Sunyata is so complete that the dualistic thinking doesn't arise at all. In Bhumi 7, the Bodhisattva understand emptiness, and in the Bhumi 8, they become empty of self. Then number 4, unshakable devotions of enlightening others. The Bodhisattva never turns back even when facing infinite suffering. They are fully stabilized in the great vows to liberate all sentient beings. Then number 5, scriptural emphasis and symbolism. The term achala itself is a declaration, movable, unwavering, and undisturbable. Many Mahayana texts place Bhumi 8 as a definite cut-off, where Bodhisattva becomes a spiritual mountains. Then there's give me summary as chart, Bhumi 7 and Bhumi 8. And then the conclusion said Bhumi 7 is a point where irreversibility begins to show, but Bhumi 8 marks a full realizations. It where the Bodhisattva becomes truly immovable, no longer cultivating the path, but living the path, embodying Buddha nature in actions. So thank you. This is my sharing for today.
Thank you. Very good. Also, there's still a lot for us to discuss later. But I want to thank all of you who presented this first hour. Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable, and everyone so far. When we come back, we have only a few of you. We've got Sunny, Samantha, Michelle, and Wei Yi. I think that's correct. Think about Who would like to start us off on the second hour? And let's come back in about 10 minutes, so 8:03. Sound good? Okay, see you all soon. Absolutely, Wei, please.
Start from here. Okay, from here. So before I really ask the question, I ask ChatGPT to explain booming 7 and 8, and then here are some key points, but I won't go. So this part, like a quick visual, is really important for me. So the 7 booming is travel through infinite words, and then the 8 booming is movable mountain. And then it gave me some symbol. Wait. And then it showed me a symbol comparison between booming 7 and booming 8. Booming 7 is far-reaching stage. It focused on vast, fearless traveling deep into Dharma. And the key quality is mystery of skillful means, profound compassion. And the symbol is journeying far. And then 8 booming is immovable stage. It's firm, unshakable stability and total non-retrogression and full stability. And the symbol is mountain-like immovability. And then here's like the main difference between those two. And those just like how I learn booming 7 and booming 8. And then it shows me the original context in Chinese right here. And I will just skip all of this and then ask the direct question about is the state achieved by entering of being in 7, or does it take place when entering booming 8? And the short answer is the Bodhisattva is already considered irreversible. So I think the word consider is really important. It's not fully unshakable, but it's already entering that stage. But when Bodhisattva's irreversibility become complete and unshakable is when the booming 8 is start. So here is the detail answer is booming 7 is achieves irreversibility, but booming 8 is that kind of irreversibility becomes perfect and immovable. And then there's saying something like what happened, like they have in booming 7, they passed the point of no return. But in booming 8, the mind becomes so stable that no internal and external condition can disturb or shake them at all. It's much deeper, like diamond-like solidity. And why the booming 8 is still significant, I think this part is really meaningful for me. Like all traces of doubt or subtle karmic obscurations are eliminated. Their meditative absorption and wisdom become perfectly natural and fully embody non-retrogression, not just in theory, but essentially, and ready to teach beings across countless universe without effort. So still, booming 7 is when achieves irreversible Bodhisattva status, but booming 8 is perfectly into that like state. And I like this metaphor. I think it's perfectly good for me, this example. Like booming 7 is a spaceship reaching escape velocity. It can't be back to Earth anymore. It's just like the very beginning to enter that space. But booming 8 is like spaceship stabilizing into perfect orbit. So it's in there already. It can endlessly gliding through the whole space. And I use another another form of ChatGPT. I use the deep research one. So this is the first time I use deep research. I just want to try a little bit about how deep research look like. So I asked the same question again, and it gave me some question back. in order to do the research. It asks me for detail, like if I want traditional source like Dashabhumika Sutra, or like major commentaries like Vasubandhu. And then I just want to focus on Dashabhumika Sutra. So it gave me some research from the entire search engine about the Bodhisattva irreversibility in the Dashabhumika Sutra. And then this one is like super long. It takes about like 8 minutes to search throughout the whole internet. And I will just summarize some of those. So like, it's a main point of is right here is key development from booming 7 to booming 8. So on the 7th ground is complete non-conceptuality. It's not yet a slight intentionally remains, like a slight intentionally still remained. But upon reaching the 8th ground, Bodhisattva wisdom become fundamentally non-conceptual. So there has no conceptual on the 8th stage. I think here is like a key point why the booming 8 is like immovable. And by the end of booming 7, most defilements have been eliminated. But when entering booming 8, that last impediment is gone. So that's the reason why booming 8 is the most significant, not booming 7. And here is another important key point is spontaneous, effortless compassion's activity. Another crucial development at booming 8 is that Bodhisattva's activity for benefiting beings become completely spontaneous and unhindered. So I think here is like a really important key point. And just go down to the conclusion where it says, the Bodhisattva becomes non-returning, non-backsliding only at this immovable stage, which is booming 8, when all conceptual clinging and affliction have been extinguished. The 7th booming though already extremely advanced, but is still considered as a penultimate stage where a slight distinction still remains, which is like the Bodhisattva still intentionally aspire to Buddhahood, but not yet cross the irascible threshold. But in contrast, the 8th booming represent the crucial breakthrough. The sutra highlights acceptance of non-arising. So this is like why booming 8 considered as like immovable stage, and booming 7 is just like from like the beginning part is just like entering but not complete. So as it shows, like the 8th ground is known as the stage of irreversible, immovable wisdom, guaranteeing the Bodhisattva's eventual arrival and complete Buddhahood. So I ask it to translate to Chinese, but like I still ask ChatGPT to do it, to summarize it a little bit for me. It's supposed to have English, but anyways. So the short answer is, I think the fully achieved is upon entering booming 8, not booming 7, just because booming 7 is like advanced, but still have a subtle aspiration for Buddhahood. But booming 8 is already fully irreversible, is complete, beyond all conceptualization and attachments. At booming 8, there's like no more, right here is no more striving, full spontaneous functioning, total non-retrogression. So here's my conclusion and then my report. Thank you. Okay, English.
Thank you, Wei. Okay. Who would like to go next? All right, Sunny, please.
Alright, so can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
So I added the Boomi 7, Boomi 8 to ChatGPT, and then it gave me like the basic summary. And then the first question I asked was, how does it change the nature of compassion in terms of effort? And then it gave me a summary saying that in Boomi 7, even though it's non-conceptually, but it still exists some kind of effort, which, for example, it uses upaya, which is intentional, for the compassion to be included, and that the word it used to describe would be responsive. And then for Boomi 8, it used a word. It was saying it's like spontaneous, that it's effortless, and compared to Boomi 7, there's no longer kind of like this intention to perform the compassion because it's just what it is. It becomes just the nature of Boomi 8. So it was saying that in the Boomi 7 there were still some skillful means added to it, and in Boomi 8 it's just effortless. And then I asked if Boomi 7 is already irreversible, why was Boomi 8 so necessary? Just like the homework asked. And then it says that for Boomi 7, the Bodhisattva trajectory is fixed. So you're like on the path and you cannot go back. And Boomi 8, and it means it's like it's already there. It's like stable and fixed. At the end, it says Boomi 7 means that the Bodhisattva path would never fall, but then Boomi 8 says it's already in place. So at the end, I asked ChatGPT to give me a very short and concise explanation. And to conclude, it just gave me a summary that Boomi 7 is like a swift wind, that it is still constantly, there's still intentional and there's engaging and changing involved, but it doesn't go back. And that Boomi 8 is like a mountain, and that it no longer moves, it's unshakable, and it's just there perfectly and spontaneously, that it just becomes part of it. And that's all I have to share.
Thank you, Sunny. Thank you. Okay. Let's see, we have Samantha or Michelle? Samantha, your hand went up first. Thank you.
Sorry, give me 1 second. I'm just not sharing the right one for some reason. So we're okay, cool. Okay, so first I asked what the 7th and 8th boomies are, but I kind of wanted to get a bigger picture to see the trajectory a bit better. So then I asked it for a summary of all of the boomies at once, and it goes through all of them. And specifically for the 7th and 8th one, It says the seventh is the far going ground, and it travels far beyond conceptual understanding, and it has mastery of upaya, where compassion and wisdom act in harmony. And then the eighth one they call the immovable ground, which achieves irreversibility, cannot regress from the path, unshakable in meditation and equanimity, no longer subject to karmic afflictions. So in this very short summary, it kind of already has a delineation of the eighth one as achieving that irreversibility. But then I kept asking just to see like how it would define the difference between 7 and 8 without me prompting it specifically about irreversibility. So I asked what the distinctive factor between each one is. And then again, for 7 and 8, the distinctive factor for 7 is a mature union of compassion and wisdom, where upaya is perfected and actions become effortless and deeply beneficial. And then for the 8th, it talks about irreversibility. So the bodhisattva can no longer fall back, and they're imperturbable in all conditions, and actions are free from ego or karma. And then, so I asked again specifically, which step is the state of being irreversible? And it mentions the 8th, immovable ground, because you can never fall back to lower stages, is completely unshaken by affliction, suffering, or ego clinging, has purified karma, and possesses deep equanimity and wavering commitment to benefiting all beings. And then, so no matter how I question it, it gave me a pretty solid answer of the 8th as being the irreversible stage. But then I asked it, can an argument be made that, I guess I should have mentioned, oh yeah, irreversibility reached at stage 7. And it says, yes, a thoughtful argument can be made that it begins at the 7th, although traditionally it's fully confirmed at the 8th. And so it kind of breaks down the argument for the 7th. So this is the stage where mastery of skillful means begins. So you have a great integration of wisdom, compassion. There's great detachment and non-dual understanding. So the bodhisattva perceives non-duality of samsara and nirvana, which undermines the roots of ego and delusion. And then the text suggests cumulative security. So the roots are already like firmly planted in the 6th and 7th stage in order for us to get to that 8th one. And then again, the start of non-conceptual wisdom begins at the 7th. And then, but then again, it says like, however, usually typically it's defined as being the 8th. And so then I asked, is the distinction of irreversibility between the 7th and 8th of a karmic nature and not psychological or philosophical, because it had mentioned those terms specifically. Oh yeah, and here it says it marks the end of karmic creation. And so it says that is how you can classify it. So it basically says the same thing again. So like it has a psychological realization of non-duality, emptiness, and upaya, and this insight is stable, but there are still traces of karmic habits and subtle dualistic residues that may remain. And so, yeah, so not quite immovable yet. And then so this is kind of the same thing over and over again. And so I asked it the difference between karmic habit and how it's different from normal habits, because it seemed to be like the key difference in its previous answer. And so it said a karmic habit is a deep subconscious imprint left by past actions, not just physical or mental, but latent tendencies stored in your like storehouse consciousness. And it can persist across lifetimes, whereas normal habits are just learned behaviors and patterns of life. And so it gave, I think, an example down here that was a lot easier for me to understand. So normal habit is like, I get nervous speaking in public, but a karmic habit would be, I instinctively fear leadership roles, despite having no reason to have a negative experience in the current life. And that's due to like past karmic patterns. And so then I asked, how do you have perfected compassion and wisdom in the 7th, yet have karmic habits still persist? And then I asked, won't the habits skew your perfection? And then it says that karmic habits do remain even when compassion and wisdom are perfected in function, but not yet perfected in essence. So in the 7th Bhumi, you can act with perfect wisdom and compassion on a practical level, but you still have some of those like extra karmic roots that are still skewing your thought process. And so I kind of questioned it a couple more times, and I kind of asked questions to make sure that I was understanding its answer properly. So then I asked it, so in order to kind of make that distinction, I said, so it's not as natural for someone in the 7th Bhumi to behave with perfect compassion, wisdom, but they eventually get there with their actions. And then chat was like, yes, that's correct. And so you still have to consciously cultivate those traits in the 7th Bhumi, meaning that there's effort, intention, and subtle traces of duality in how it's expressed. And there might be micro tendencies of little tiny karmic habits that can affect what you do. It says not in a harmful way, but not entirely spontaneous either. And so then the way that I had, and so it says here for the 8th, it's kind of like flow of water downhill, so it's automatic, tireless, etc., etc. And so then I asked it, so a lot of discipline is required in the 7th in order to meet the Bodhisattva standard, whereas in the 8th there's less or no effort. And then they confirmed that. And so it kind of says the same thing again. And then there's like there's an interesting chart here of like discipline, effort, karmic habit, compassion, wisdom, inner duality. And in the 7th, basically all of it is still, you still kind of need those things a little bit. And then in the 8th, it's everything spontaneous, eliminated, and it's natural and smooth. And then, so then I asked it, this is kind of off topic, but then I asked, in Buddhism, usually they emphasize effort, diligence, and intention as vital to practice. But if those are no longer needed by the 8th, why are there still more bhumis afterward? And it just says that even though you might have achieved perfection for yourself, by the 8th, the rest of the Bodhisattva path is not about self-liberation, it's about liberating other beings. So you still have to perfect skillful means, wisdom, etc., in order to help others. And I think that's all. Everything else is kind of off topic, so I'll just stop there.
Thank you, Samantha. Okay, and we have one more.
Hey there.
Hi, Michelle.
All right. Hi, let me share this. Okay. Sorry, there's noise in the background. All right. Here we go. And so, is in the way a little bit. All right. Here we go. All right. So, the AI, I'm using Notebook LM. So it's just pulling from the actual sutras. So it's very definitive in its answer, but I asked some other questions. Basically, it says that one might believe that irreversibility is attained in the 7th ground due to several factors. I think that the most convincing here are, it says on the 7th ground, the Bodhisattva attains the skill of non-production. This profound understanding of non-arising could be interpreted as a state where the Bodhisattva's realization is so deep that regression is unlikely, thus appearing irreversible. Also, here it says the implementation of effortful preparatory practices reaches complete fullness in the 7th ground, enabling entry into the path of wisdom and spiritual super knowledges. This culmination of effort might suggest that a point of no return has been reached on the Bodhisattva's cultivation. The Bodhisattva abiding on the 7th ground has, for the most part, gone beyond the multitudes beset by desire and other afflictions. Of course, it speaks on patience. My favorite here, though, is that it says the seventh ground marks a stage of effortlessness and spontaneous engagement in practices to benefit beings and the integration of all of the paramitas, which Reverend Kanjan was speaking on. This suggests a natural and deeply ingrained commitment to the Bodhisattva path, potentially implying irreversibility. But what it seems to me is kind of definitive here is that what really differentiates the seventh bhumi from the eighth and what really makes the eighth irreversible is the fact that in this seventh, there's still effort put toward all of the good deeds. And in the eighth, it is you no longer have to effort. And therefore, it's kind of automatic. The way it's put here, let me see, where is it exactly? Yeah, okay. So, in the eighth ground, relinquishes all urgent endeavors and duality-based thought. On arriving at the ground of immovability, all urgent endeavors are entirely relinquished. He does not course in duality-based thought. There is no longer any present manifestation of any sort of recollective thought. Also spontaneously manifesting wisdom and compassion without deliberate effort. And yeah, here abides in karmic deeds arising from knowledge rather than deliberately effortful practices. He then entirely abandons all deliberately effortful thought, resides solely within karmic works guided by knowledge. This suggests a shift from intentional striving to a more natural knowledge-driven progression, where it's like there's not a thought of, okay, well, I could take this other action instead. This is just kind of the natural effect of the causes at hand is to take the action that is most beneficial to all sentient beings. And at the eighth ground, that knowledge and awareness is fully possessed. So I think that's kind of like the most compelling. Also here it says the text explicitly states that irreversibility is achieved upon entering the eighth ground because it is characterized by irreversibility. This ground is referred to as the ground of immovability. So that's just a direct quote from the text. But there are like a couple of other points here on how we get there through a journey through the bhumis. It says, while the sources mention a resolute intention set on irreversibility as one of the 10 intentions for entering the third ground, which is why we figured there was a correlation between the third and the eighth. And a bodhisattva on the first ground is described as being on a non-retreating path. The eighth ground is where this irreversibility becomes a defining characteristic. On this ground, the bodhisattva attains unproduced dharma's patience, signifying a profound understanding that leads to being free from being moved by conceptual thought or afflictive emotions and a transcendence of duality-based thought. This stability makes their progress towards Buddhahood irreversible. So I'll just kind of leave it there so we can get into the class discussion.
Thank you, Michelle. Professor Lancaster, you're muted.
Here's what I want to do for the remaining time quickly from everybody. I would like a little statement. Did your idea of research change by doing this exercise? This was a difficult exercise, as you could see. It was really hard to come to a complete answer. Well, if I may, I'll call in the order of people that you presented. Shanshan, how do you feel about, was this no change? This didn't challenge any of your ideas about scholarship, or you mind?
Yeah, I think during my research is when I reading some article from Vero Master Xingyun, so I kind of like have one kind of idea, and then during the research I kind of like turn to another point. But at the end, I think it kind of matched to my knowledge, that because I believe that the 10-gram bodhisattva is a process. It cannot, it there's something happen in the first bhumi and then lead to second, and then there's something always connected. So it could not happen that only suddenly happens at one stage. So I think my research helped me to confirm my my knowledge, my idea.
Okay, good. Con, you were next. What did you
Um,
feel?
I somehow have a slightly different view now than what Shanshan mentioned. Initially, I also believe that the 10 boomies are very progressive in terms of you have to get to first, then the second, and the third. Actually, the question, Professor, you asked this week also kind of leads to that, right? You have to get to 7 before you get to 8. But as I was reading through the 10 boomies holistically, I feel just speaking from my personal experience, we may have some aspect of each bhumi a little bit. For example, the first bhumi talk about joy or generosity. The second bhumi talk about ethical disciplines. The third one talk about patience and vigor or meditation or wisdom. We may all have a little bit of that. It's just not very complete. So in a way, I feel maybe it is progressive in a way. Maybe just it's Buddha's skillful means to teach in such a way it's easier for us to comprehend. But I do feel we have a mixture of that. It's just like maybe a less of this, a little more of that. So that's sort of my thinking right now. So it's sort of slightly changed my perspective a little bit, but I still think in general it's still very progressive, but maybe there's a like a more mixtured. Yeah, that's my thought.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Ong Kong, how about you, Venerable? What's your idea of scholarship after doing this exercise?
To me, after doing the research by AI, it helped me to figure out the Pumi 7 and Pumi 8 that I normally just thinking just like something in order, first, second, third, and fourth, something like that. And then I never think number 7 or 7 Pumi might be irreversible because it doesn't mention in this in that stage. However, when I try to understand the Pumi 8 and Pumi 7, it close to each other. And then we can say like it's not fully irreversible or can say like partially irreversible. So it's something that I can hear and I can understand, not just, and for the Dasabhumika Sutra, it's a like this for the text that we learn, and the other text, just like our Tamsaka Sutra, something like that. It just say Bhumi 7 is also irreversible. And also, even in the AI, also tell that for the Bhumika Sutra, like strictly to mention, because it depends on the stage 7 and stage 8. If 8 is irreversible, so stage 7 should be not irreversible, something like that. So I can like understand a lot of idea that coming up with each stage 7 and 8, and then it change me, not just change all, but I can understand, I can look like different angle of each Bhumi, and I get a lot of idea out of that. Okay.
Thanks a lot. Good, good. Kanjin, how about you, Reverend Kanjin?
Yes, I felt as if it allowed me to see the more subtleties between the two, that I could go back and then, how do you say, investigate it further. And then the most important was, I had this kind of pre-concept concerning the idea of, as I was stating from the Nirvana Sutra, about the practice of the six paramita and the potential reversibility of the bodhisattva if they were not to follow that. That actually, the conclusion allowed me to kind of come to terms with that, and then actually to study a little more that, the one being the ultimate certainty, which is the Bhumi 8, and the other being the practical diligence, which of course we see in the Nirvana Sutra through the six paramitas, and that they're actually supportive of the same. Through the research, it allowed me to see in a more flexible way, I would say, the kind of correlation between the two, where before I was having a hard time making how do you say, conceptually understanding the difference between the two. So yeah, that helped me in the research.
Okay. I think Venerable Sanjip has left us, right?
Yes.
Okay,
He's not here.
so we'll go to Wei. How about you?
So at the beginning, I just used AI to try to find a simple answer, like what's the differences, and then I try to find the direct answer to Dr. Lancaster's question. But after I see a summary about the author, I realize I need to know a little bit more. So I just use like a deep research. I try to see more resources. And then after I read all the answers, I literally click on each link to see the resources answers. So it definitely helped me to learn more about the sutra and then learn more about Bhumi 7 and Bhumi 8. It kind of forced me to want to review the entire sutra, because I only know like a really broad meaning about what the sutra really about. But right now, I really want to go a little bit deeper on each stage. Yeah, that's after I do my research of this week's exercise.
Thank you. Sunny?
I think for like the previous Bhumi comparisons, for some of them I didn't feel like it had to have a progression. But for this one, the 7th and 8th Bhumi, for me personally, I think it definitely, you need to reach 7 Bhumi first before going to 8 because I feel like it's kind of like a progress, and Boomi 8 is the goal. And it's like once you learn something, you can't unlearn. So I definitely think that Boomi 7 had to come before Boomi 8. And that was something that I wasn't sure before doing this homework.
Okay. Let's Samantha.
I also feel like the progression is kind of like I can see why it's called like there's like the stages of progression, but at the same time, like Khan, I was also thinking it's not exactly like a step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But I think it's almost like more like a deepening or an expansion of all of the things that come before it, which is a form of progression. But I think it's more about like you start with the same things, but you're just like trying to get better and better at it across time and as you go through the steps. And I guess like for how I was, because you mentioned like the idea of scholarship, so I feel like the way that I usually have been approaching the questions for this class is I'll just kind of start asking the question that you prompt, and then I'll kind of go off into tangents. And I feel like that tangents sometimes can be really helpful for contextualizing the actual question that I start with, because the way that I usually learn is like I need to take in a lot of information and synthesize it before I can kind of make a conclusion. And so it's just kind of like inverted triangle, like narrowing process of you just start asking like a bunch of random questions that are just partially related, and then eventually you find the threads that bring it together, and then you can have a more interesting conversation about things.
Thank you. Last, Michelle.
So I, through this process, see the value in observing everyone's research processes more. Like even just seeing ChatGPT's deep research capabilities now, then that kind of, I think, overall advances the possibilities of research. Also in hearing everyone else's perspective and what they came up with, it's more of a collaborative environment that I also think is very helpful. And then kind of like veggie backing off of what Khan, Sunny, and Samantha said, I think that we often do possess some of the qualities in the various boomies, but perhaps like in reaching the perfection of the paramitas and the perfection of wisdom and skillful means in the 7th bhumi, then that's how we actually get to the point of the 8th bhumi. And perhaps that's where it becomes like more firmly successive, where we actually do have to perfect the first 7 before it becomes irreversible. And then that's when we're in the 8th. And we have aspects of like various boomies now, but they're not perfected. So only through actually reaching the perfection of them can we become irreversible and achieve the perfection of the 9th and 10th as well, because those are like kind of higher levels of earlier boomies where we see glimpses of them, but we won't have the perfection of it until we arrive at the perfection of like the first 7. And that's just my thought.
Thanks. How are you listening today? You have anything changed in your way of thinking?
Well, it's getting more exciting than before, that's for sure. And also plus I was also reading your article or your speech. It really I think it's give me such a very good example. For me, I'm from outside looking at the class, see how the technology helping the our classmates to achieve or trying, in a different way. In many perspectives, you can compare. Many of us is so young, new generation, and then we don't necessarily have the old experience of the traditional, like, our, teachers' way of doing things. But we are, it's very interesting for me to see that, with, and also we have Kangen Reverend. It's another example. It's a very experienced in traditional way, and also it's a very engaged with this new way. And then, from his experience, you can see this is a, just being a classmate, looking at people from different experience or with a different background or skill or capability or their expertise. I believe everybody of you have your own expertise. And the way you, through this new tool, and enable yourself, or we can say empower yourself. But I think it's not just, it's a very interesting. Right now I have not be able to really summarize in a way, but I think everybody can summarize for yourself. Is for this stage. This is a continuous dynamic, very interesting. So it's just, I think this form of class is really, especially today, is really showing up the difference, I think. I don't know, but I'm looking at you and hear your report and sensing your own deeper, change, or really get into it and starting, just like some of you already saying, this way is forcing me, or it probably is not forcing you. It's your own self, this how do you say, motivation or learning, curiosity, or that term is not really accurate, but there's some kind of an internal, being capability, being triggered or being enlightened, right? So I think that's a part of the Buddha within ourselves as well. Anyway, I'm already taking too long a time, but I'm just, that's my thought.
Okay. Chris, what do you have to share with us?
I found it very interesting, all the different approaches to this question. People cut up the question and their approaches in different ways. I think there's a lot to be gained from listening to one another about the different ways that you tackled this question, from keyword searches to bringing in other sutras, traditions, and so forth. So I was really interested in just the variety of approaches in terms of scholarly research. Yeah, this question of the Bhumis is a fascinating one. Reminds me of a traffic intersection, and you have enter the intersection at the yellow light.
If I may, I just want to point one thing out, which is pretty technical. It's saying this kind of a class approach. So we don't, even though we try many of the different, AI system, but hearing our classmate to in-depth using different environment, that's already save our time, right? I think that also indicating, that is some front is a very beneficial. So I think we can learn quite a lot besides the content, but also the environment and the way Professor Lancaster is guiding us into this. I think that's very beneficial.
Okay, thank you all. Let me just say from my side, I'm learning a lot by listening and watching how you all have been working. And I realize how much research is shifting and changing. And the work which you're doing is very different than anything that I did when I was a student. Very different. And so I've been thinking to myself, how do I next challenge you guys and gals? How do I next challenge you? And this is what I'm going to tell you what the assignment is for next week now. I want each of you to think up a very hard and difficult question about the sutra, and then see how far you can get with answering your own question. I want you to make it hard. I want you to think about the fact that you've got all this resource before you. So don't give yourself a softball. Play hardball with yourself. And spend some time before you settle on a question. Think seriously about what is it that I might learn that I've never even hardly thought about before. Or sometimes a question where you say to yourself, I have ignored and put off thinking about or thought this is too hard, this is beyond me, I'm not going to go there place. Maybe it's time to go there. You may want to ask a question about how could I apply this to some very mundane thing in my life? What does the sutra have to tell me about washing dishes? And sometimes the simpler the question, the harder it is to answer. But I really think that part of what you want to do as scholars is that your task in the future is to be able to ask yourself the questions. Because once you leave school, nobody asks you a question. You have to come up with your own questions. Your articles or books or whatever research writing that you do, it has to come from something which you deal with. I watched a lot of scholars, and sometimes I see that I've observed very good scholars, but they could never think up a question for themselves They always worked their whole career on the question which was given to them when they were a student. And I think that's a pity, to be truthful. So I want you to really explore and think, how can I come up with my own ideas, my own questions? And maybe this is a place to turn to AI and ask AI to help you. What about, has anybody ever dealt with this question? And how did they deal with it? Am I content with the way it's been done? Etc. Well, thank you. You all gave very good reports tonight. It's a tricky question that I ask you. It does not have a simple answer, does it? And that's the way it is in scholarship. There are very few black and white, yes, no. And you have dealt with this one. So now I would like you to delve into your own psyche and your own abilities and see if you can dig up your own inner questions, basically, that really interest you. And if you find you're not that interested in the question that you ask, drop it and look for a new one. And keep going till you get one where it's exciting or it's interesting, or you just can't find the answer easily. All right, thank you all. Thank you, Chris, for your help tonight. Howie, always good to have you with us. And to all of you, good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank
night.
you.
you.
Good night.